The alarms on Orion 7's station never sounded like Earth's. Dr. An Vu had been living in exile for so long that he sometimes struggled to remember what Earth alarms had sounded like. But he was certain they weren't this shrill, this artificial. Perhaps that was fitting for humanity's current state, scattered across the galaxy, disconnected from their home world for 2 centuries, existing in artificial environments that tried and failed to replicate what was lost. Vu silenced the alarm with a wave of his hand and squinted at the holographic display hovering above his desk. The notification pulsed an urgent red. Anomalous signal detected. Ancient Earth satellite, X-17 classification, priority alpha. Computer, display signal characteristics. Vu commanded, his voice still rough from sleep. He had been working late again, lost in the patterns of a dead language from one of the colony worlds. The air before him filled with cascading data streams, frequency analyses, and cryptographic patterns. His eyes, enhanced with neural implants standard for cosmic linguists, automatically began picking apart the structure. This was no ordinary transmission. The complexity was beyond anything he'd seen in years. Temporal stability analysis, he ordered. Signal degradation imminent. The computer responded in its neutral tone. Complete signal dissolution estimated in 48 hours. Vu stood up so quickly his chair clattered to the floor behind him. 2 days. He had 2 days to decode what might be the last message ever sent from Earth. The year was 2345, 2 centuries after the 3rd neural wave disaster had severed all communication with Earth. Humanity had survived, spread across dozens of worlds and stations, but Earth itself had gone silent. Some believed the homeworld was dead. Others, like Vu, held on to hope that somewhere, somehow, Earth endured. "Sophia, initialize," Vu called out. A shimmer of light coalesced into the form of his AI assistant. Sophia appeared as a woman of indeterminate age, her features a perfect blend of all human ethnicities, her expression perpetually calm. "Good morning, Dr. Vu. I detect elevated cortisol levels. Is something wrong?" "We've received a signal from X-17. Sophia's expression shifted subtly, unusual for an AI of her generation. "The lost Earth satellite. How interesting." "More than interesting. It's revolutionary. And we have less than 48 hours before the signal degrades beyond recovery. I'm initiating Project Terminus." Sophia's holographic form flickered momentarily. "Dr. Vu, I must remind you that the station's board has explicitly forbidden the continuation of Project Terminus. Director Min Kiet specifically—" "I know what Kiet said," Vu interrupted, already gathering his equipment. "But this is different. This is what we've been waiting for. This could be our last chance to re-establish contact with Earth. The board believes that pursuing such contact could destabilize the current interplanetary political balance." Vu laughed bitterly. "The balance that keeps humanity fractured and controlled by corporations? That balance." Sophia remained silent, her programming preventing her from directly engaging in political discussion. Vu sighed. "Initialize the quantum decryption array and send a message to my team. Confidential channels only." "Very well," Sophia replied. "But I must note my concern in the official record." "Note whatever you want. Just help me decode this message." As Sophia's form dissolved into streams of light that raced through the station's systems, Vu stared at the cryptographic patterns swirling before him. Something about them seemed oddly familiar, stirring memories he had long suppressed. Memories of Earth, of family, of loss. The lab came alive around him as systems activated and holographic interfaces materialized. Through the viewport, Jupiter loomed massive and swirling, the gas giant's eternal storms a reminder of nature's indifference to human concerns. Orion 7 orbited in the Lagrange point, balanced perfectly between the planet's gravity and the pull of its largest moon. Vu's fingers danced through the interface, initiating the preliminary decryption protocols. As the first layers of the message began to unravel, fragments appeared, bits of code, sections of text in a language that seemed both familiar and alien. And then, unexpectedly, a face. The hologram was distorted, broken, but unmistakably human. A woman, her features obscured by static, seemed to look directly at Vu. For a fraction of a second, he thought he recognized her. "Sophia," he called, his voice wavering. "Enhance and stabilize this image segment." "Working," the AI responded. "However, there is unusual encryption on this particular data packet. It appears to be genetically keyed." Genetically keyed? That technology was theoretical even before we lost contact with Earth. Nevertheless, the encryption appears to require genetic identification for full access. Vu hesitated only a moment. "Run it against my profile." "Dr. Vu, that would be a violation of privacy protocols and—" "Override. Authorization. Vu Alpha 9. Sophia paused, then responded, "Override accepted. Beginning genetic comparison." The lab door hissed open behind him. Vu turned to see Dr. Min Kiet standing in the doorway, his expression a mixture of disappointment and anger. "I received an alert that Project Terminus had been activated," Kiet said, stepping into the lab. "I thought we had agreed this was over, and—" Vu gestured to the displays around them. "We've received a direct transmission from X-17, the last Earth satellite still in operation. This changes everything." Kiet moved closer, his eyes scanning the data streams. "Or it changes nothing. We've built a stable society here, across dozens of worlds, opening old wounds, stirring up memories of Earth. What good would it do? We have a right to know our history, our origins." "History is what led to the neural wave disasters," Kiet countered. 3 times humanity nearly destroyed itself with its own technology. Perhaps the silence from Earth is a blessing. Before Vu could respond, Sophia's voice interrupted them. "Genetic comparison complete. Match identified." Both men turned to stare at the holographic display. "That's impossible," Kiet whispered. The genetic profile overlaid perfectly with Vu's own. The message, or at least this portion of it, had been specifically encoded for his DNA. "How?" Vu asked, his voice barely audible. "How could a 200-year-old message from Earth contain my genetic signature?" Kiet's expression hardened. "This is exactly why Project Terminus was shut down. This is dangerous, and beyond dangerous. Or it's the breakthrough we've been waiting for. The board will not approve this research." Vu turned to face his former mentor. "Then don't tell them. Give me the 48 hours before the signal degrades. What harm could come from that?" Kiet was silent for a long moment, studying Vu's face. Finally, he sighed. 48 hours, not a minute more, and this stays between us." "Agreed." After Kiet left, Vu turned back to the workstation. "Sophia, begin full spectrum analysis. Focus on the genetically keyed segments." "Working," the AI responded. "I should note that there are irregularities in the signal pattern that suggest deliberate fragmentation. This message was designed to be difficult to decode, or designed to be decoded only by the right person," Vu murmured. As the hours passed, more fragments of the message became clear. What emerged was disturbing. References to a project called Lineage, mentions of genetic continuity and preservation protocols. Most troubling were the references to Council Oversight and Light Directive. "The Council of Light," Vu said, pacing the lab floor. "I've heard rumors, conspiracy theories about a secret organization that controlled information flow before the disasters. Such an organization is not in any official historical record," Sophia noted. "Official records have been sanitized for centuries. Everyone knows that." As Vu worked, memories kept surfacing, unbidden, unwanted. His childhood on the Mars colony, his parents' research, the accident that had taken them when he was just 10 years old. At least, He had always been told it was an accident. 17 hours into the decryption, a new hologram appeared, this one clearer, more stable. A young woman, perhaps in her 20s, with features that struck Vu as hauntingly familiar. "Message fragment decoded," Sophia announced. "Audio restoration at 60%. "Play it," Vu commanded. The holographic woman began to speak, her voice distorted but understandable. "This message is intended for the Terminus. If you are receiving this, the lineage protocol has succeeded. Your genetic signature confirms you are the endpoint of our carefully maintained line. You may not understand now, but you were created for this moment. Earth is not lost. The silence is deliberate. The Council of Light believes humanity is safer fragmented, controlled. They engineered the neural wave disasters to prevent what they saw as inevitable self-destruction through technological advancement. But there were those of us who disagreed, who believed humanity deserved its freedom, its unity, its home." The message dissolved into static, leaving Vu staring at empty air. "Replay," he whispered. "Enhance audio further. Additional processing would require more computing power than I currently have access to," Sophia replied. "Then get more. Reroute from non-essential systems. That would be noticed by station security." Vu ran his hands through his hair in frustration. "Then we'll have to be creative." He worked through the night, pushing the decryption forward, ignoring the alerts from his neural implants, warning of fatigue. More fragments emerged, technical specifications for communication systems, coordinates that seemed to point to locations on Earth, names of people long dead or perhaps never known beyond Earth. And more personal messages. The same woman, sometimes joined by others, speaking directly to him as if they knew him, as if they had created him. "Your parents were part of our network," one message fragment revealed. "Their deaths were not accidental. They discovered the truth about the Council and had begun preparing you. Though you were too young to understand, we managed to preserve their genetic material, their memories. You are their legacy in more ways than you know." Vu's hands trembled as he worked. Could it be true? Had his entire existence been engineered as part of some 2-century-old plan? 30 hours in, station security detected the unusual power usage. Vu received a warning from Kiet, a reminder that their agreement had conditions. Vu ignored it, diving deeper into the message, feeling closer than ever to understanding. 36 hours in, he found what seemed to be the core of the message. Detailed instructions for re-establishing communication with Earth. Not just coordinates and frequencies, but codes and protocols that would bypass whatever systems had kept Earth isolated for centuries. "This is it," he told Sophia, exhaustion evident in his voice. "This is how we reconnect. Dr. Vu, I have detected an anomaly in the station's security systems. Someone is attempting to access this lab remotely." Vu stiffened. "The Council of Light? Here?" "I cannot confirm the identity of the intruders, but their methods suggest advanced knowledge of our systems. Lock everything down. Route all data through the secure quantum buffer." "Already done. However, they are employing countermeasures I have not encountered before." A new alarm sounded, not the station's standard alert, but something deeper, more resonant. A moment later, the lab door emergency locks engaged with a heavy thud. "They're isolating us," Vu realized, "cutting us off from the rest of the station. Dr. Vu, I am detecting what appears to be a targeted electromagnetic pulse being prepared. Such a pulse would erase all data we have gathered, including the original signal. 40 hours in, and everything was about to be lost." "How much more of the message can you decode before they hit us?" Vu asked, fingers flying across the interface. "Approximately 22% remains encoded. However, I believe the most critical information has already been extracted." Vu made a decision. "Begin transmission protocol." "Transmission to where? We have no confirmed destination." To everywhere. Every colony, every station, every ship. Use the deep space array. That would violate dozens of communication protocols and laws. Sophia, look at what we've discovered. A conspiracy that's kept humanity fractured for centuries. A deliberate silencing of Earth. If we don't get this information out now, it may be lost forever. The AI was silent for a moment, her holographic form flickering as if in thought. You understand that such an action would be irreversible. The consequences would be severe. I understand. Very well. Preparing broadcast. As Sophia worked. Vu continued with the final decryption efforts. The last pieces were falling into place, revealing a truth more complex and more personal than he had imagined. Earth had not been destroyed. It had been quarantined, isolated by the Council of Light after the third neural wave disaster. The disaster itself had been engineered to prevent what the Council saw as humanity's inevitable self-destruction through unchecked technological advancement. By fragmenting humanity, by cutting off Earth, they believed they were saving the species. But a resistance had formed. Scientists, philosophers, ordinary people who believed in humanity's right to determine its own destiny. They had created Project Lineage, a centuries-long plan to maintain genetic lines, to create individuals who could one day re-establish contact with Earth. Individuals whose DNA would be recognized by the old systems, who could bypass the barriers the Council had erected. Individuals like Vu. His parents had been part of the resistance. Their deaths had been assassinations, not accidents. But before they died, they had ensured their genetic material, their memories, would be preserved. Vu was their son, but also something more, a carefully designed key to unlock humanity's future. Broadcast ready, Sophia announced. However, I must inform you that I have detected breaching charges being placed on the emergency doors. We have approximately 3 minutes before physical intrusion. Vu looked up from his work, suddenly aware of the danger. Begin transmission. Maximum dispersal. Transmitting. The lab's systems hummed as the message, the truth about Earth, about the Council of Light, about Project Lineage, began streaming to every corner of human civilization. A heavy impact shook the door. Metal groaned. Dr. Vu, I recommend you utilize the emergency escape pod. My systems can maintain the transmission independently. Vu shook his head. Not without the complete message. There's still something missing. He turned back to the final fragment, the piece that had been most heavily encrypted. As it finally resolved, the holographic woman appeared again, clearer than before. For the first time, Vu could see her face properly. She had his eyes, his mother's mouth, features that spanned generations, preserved through careful genetic maintenance. To the terminus, she said, her voice strong and clear. To our descendant who carries our hope, you are the final link in our chain, the culmination of 2 centuries of planning and sacrifice. Your DNA contains markers that will be recognized by Earth's defensive systems. Only you can re-establish contact. Only you can bring humanity home. She paused, her expression softening. We do not know who you will be, what life you will have lived. But know that you were created in love, with purpose. Earth awaits its children's return. The path has been prepared. You are the key. The hologram faded as another impact hit the door, metal buckling inward. Transmission at 70%, Sophia reported. Estimated completion in 90 seconds. Not enough time, Vu muttered, looking at the failing door. They'll stop it before it completes. He made a decision. Sophia, reroute all remaining power to the transmission. Everything, including life support if necessary. Dr. Vu, that would... Do it. The AI paused, then nodded. Rerouting power. Transmission rate increasing. Estimated completion in 45 seconds. The door buckled further, a gap appearing. Through it, Vu could see masked figures, equipment designed to disrupt and destroy. 30 seconds to transmission completion, Sophia announced. Vu gathered what he could, data crystals containing copies of the message, his personal research. He moved toward the small emergency escape pod built into the wall of the lab. 20 seconds. The door gave way with a screech of tortured metal. Figures in black armor poured in, weapons raised. Transmission interruption imminent, Sophia warned. Vu hesitated at the escape pod door, looking back at Sophia's holographic form. You'll be destroyed when they take the lab. The AI smiled, a surprisingly human expression. My primary systems have already been transferred along with the transmission. What you see is merely an interface. 10 seconds to completion. The armed figures were sweeping the lab, placing devices on equipment. One spotted Vu and raised a weapon. 5 seconds. Thank you, Sophia, Vu said, stepping into the pod. Transmission complete, Sophia announced as the pod door sealed. The last thing Vu saw before the pod launched was a blinding flash as the lab's systems overloaded, taking the intruders with them. The escape pod ejected from Orion 7, small enough to avoid immediate detection, programmed to follow a randomized course before attempting to rendezvous with any friendly vessel. Inside, Vu collapsed into the single seat, the events of the past 40 hours catching up with him all at once. He was the terminus, the end point of a plan centuries in the making. His entire existence had been engineered to bring humanity back into contact with its home world. And now, across the solar system, across all human settlements, the truth was spreading. The message from Earth, the revelation of the Council of Light's manipulation, the possibility of return, none of it could be contained now. Vu activated the pod's minimal communication system. Almost immediately, he began receiving fragments of transmissions, reactions to the broadcast. Shock, disbelief, hope. The human diaspora was awakening to a truth long hidden. A soft chime indicated an incoming secure transmission. Cautiously, Vu accepted it. A hologram appeared, not Sophia, but a new face. A man, elderly, with the weathered look of someone who had seen too much. Dr. Anvu, the man said. My name is Tran. I represent what remains of the resistance your ancestors began. We've been waiting for you. How did you find me? Vu asked. The same way the Council did. We've been monitoring X-17 for decades, waiting for it to activate. We knew the message would come eventually. And now? Now we move to the next phase. The message has been sent, but that's only the beginning. The path back to Earth is complex, guarded. You are the key, but the lock has many tumblers. Vu looked down at his hands, thinking of the genetic markers he carried, the legacy of generations of careful planning. I don't know if I can be what they intended, he admitted. I'm just a linguist. Tran smiled. You are far more than that. Dr. Vu, you are the culmination of centuries of hope, and you won't be alone. All across human space, people are responding to the message. The Council's control is already fracturing. Outside the pod's small viewport, Jupiter's swirling clouds seemed suddenly less ominous, less isolating. Somewhere beyond this system, Earth waited, not dead, not gone, just silent, waiting for the right voice to answer. Where do we go from here? Vu asked. To a safe location first, then to gather allies, and finally, when we are ready, to Earth. Vu nodded, feeling a sense of purpose unlike anything he had known before. For 2 centuries, humanity had lived in exile, scattered and divided. Now, perhaps, they could find their way home. As the pod accelerated away from Orion 7, from the life he had known, Vu opened one of the data crystals he had managed to save. It contained not just the message from Earth, but something more personal, images of his ancestors. the people who had created Project Lineage, who had engineered his very existence. Among them, he found the woman from the hologram, his great-great-grandmother, or perhaps even more generations removed. In her eyes, he saw his own determination reflected across the centuries. "I will complete what you started," he promised her silently. "I will bring us home." The pod's systems hummed as it calculated a new trajectory, responding to coordinates Tran had sent. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger from the Council of Light, challenges Vu could barely imagine. But also, somewhere ahead, lay Earth. Not just a memory, not just a myth, but a real world waiting to be rediscovered. Waiting for him, specifically, to unlock the path home. The final message from Earth had been decoded, and against all odds, across 2 centuries of silence, it had reached the one person in all of human space for whom it was intended. And Vu, the terminus, the key to humanity's return. As the pod accelerated to full speed, leaving the Jovian system behind, Vu felt something he had not experienced in years. Hope, not just for himself, but for all of humanity. Earth was calling its children home. And finally, after 200 years, someone was answering.